Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're diving into a case that's a real head scratcher, full of love, lies, and even a Ouija board that might have messed with the jury's decision. It's the Wadhurst murders.
Mm.
And picture this: a quiet English village back in 1993. A seemingly happy newlywed couple, Harry and Nicola Fuller, found murdered in their cottage. No forced entry, no obvious motive, just lots and lots of questions.
Yeah, this case is really something. It's not just about who did it. It's about this crazy series of events and mistakes that almost let the killer get away with it.
So let's start with Harry and Nicola. They didn't really seem like a good match, did they?
Right.
Harry was this charismatic car dealer, but with a bit of a shady past. And he was 18 years older than Nicola, who was more, well, quiet and reserved.
Yeah, and their romance moved fast, really fast. They got married quickly, and everyone, especially Nicola's family, had their doubts.
Right, right.
Some people wondered if Harry's charm was hiding something a bit darker. And as we dig into his past, you see why those suspicions weren't totally off base.
Okay, so red flags right from the start. Now, the crime scene, it was pretty gruesome. Harry was found in the utility room, shot in the back. Nicola was upstairs, shot multiple times. And there was this weird thing. Sugar sprinkled on Harry's body. Was that like some kind of ritual?
Oh no, the sugar, that was intentional. A way to mislead the investigation. A classic red herring.
Ah, I see.
Killer probably wanted to make it look like a drug thing, but as we'll see, the truth was way more personal.
So it wasn't a random attack. No forced entry, no signs of robbery. It all points to someone they knew, someone holding a grudge. Who are the first suspects?
One of the first guys who caught the investigators' attention was Roger Lee, a known gangster who was connected to Harry. Lee was a tough guy, a history of violence, and he had a reason. Harry had reported a stolen car, and that led to a bust that cost Lee a ton of money.
Oof.
He was even seen driving a Jaguar that matched one spotted near the cottage around the time of the murders.
Sounds like they had their guy. But I'm guessing that's not the end of it, is it?
You guessed it. Phone records actually cleared Lee. Back to square one for the investigators.
So they had to go back to the drawing board and
Right.
dig a little deeper.
Yeah, they started looking closer at Harry's past, and it turned out he wasn't the squeaky clean businessman he seemed to be. Shady business dealings, changing his phone number a bunch of times. Makes you think he was trying to stay one step ahead of someone.
So Harry had secrets.
Lots of them.
Did the police have any idea who might have wanted him dead?
Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. The Fullers, they had this habit of recording their phone calls.
Every call.
Yeah, and among those tapes, they found a message from a guy calling himself Steve.
Steve?
He was angry, threatening Harry, promising some kind of confrontation.
So they had a name, but no face to go with it. How did they find this mysterious Steve?
It was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. They talked to so many Steves, from Harry's past friends, business partners, anyone who might have had a reason to be angry, but none of them seemed to fit.
A dead end.
A complete...
But then there's this incredible break in the case, and it all hinges on Nicola's desperate attempt to call for help. It's where the story gets really, really heartbreaking.
It does.
Tell me more.
When the police redialed the phone found near Nicola's body, it connected straight to emergency services.
Wow.
And there was no record of a 999 call from the cottage. Turns out Nicola did call, but she'd been shot in the jaw. All that came through were muffled cries and groans.
So the operator just thought it was a prank call.
Yeah, help was right there, but they had no idea. It's chilling to think the killer was probably still in the house while she was on the phone.
That's terrifying.
It really is.
What's even scarier is that the recording actually caught the final gunshot. Help was just seconds away. I can't imagine how desperate Nicola must have felt in those last moments.
And for the investigators, it was this awful reminder that they were racing against time.
So how did this 999 call, as tragic as it was, lead them to Steve? They couldn't have traced the voice from those muffled sounds, could they?
Not a chance. They needed a new plan. They decided to go public with it. They aired a clip of Harry's conversation with Steve on Crime Watch, that show that highlights unsolved cases.
Oh, smart.
And you wouldn't believe it, 2 viewers recognized the voice.
Wait, so one of them was Steve himself? What are the odds?
Exactly. His name was Steve Young, and he was Harry's insurance broker. At first, he denied it, said it wasn't him on the recording.
Of course.
But in the end, he admitted to being at the cottage that morning.
I bet he had a whole bunch of explanations for that. What was his story?
His first story was that he went to meet Harry about a car and just stumbled on the crime scene.
Right.
but the police were suspicious right away.
Yeah, I can see why.
Young was way too calm and collected for someone who just found 2 people murdered. And then there was his hobby.
A hobby? What kind of hobby?
Oh, it wasn't stamp collecting or anything like that. When they searched his house, they found this hidden arsenal. Deactivated grenade launchers, bayonets, replica submachine guns. The guy had enough to arm a small army. It was a total shock, especially since he seems so normal on the outside.
So this seemingly normal insurance broker had a secret stash of weapons and a connection to the victim.
It's a lot to unpack, right?
It is. So what was his motive? Why do all this?
Money. A classic story of greed and desperation.
Isn't it always?
It seems like it. Steve Young was drowning in debt, his business was failing, and he was about to lose everything.
Okay.
Remember how Harry was mixed up in some shady business? Well, the police found that a large amount of money had vanished from Harry's accounts, and a deposit for the exact same amount, all in 20-pound notes, showed up in Young's account on the morning of the murders.
Whoa.
Yeah, pretty damning, right?
Seems like a slam dunk case, doesn't it?
You'd think so, right?
But then the jury steps in and throws a wrench in the works. A move straight out of a horror movie.
That's right. Just when it looked like justice was about to happen, the jury did something that added a whole new level of crazy to the case.
I am hooked. We'll have to get to that in part 2 of our deep dive. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with the story of how a Ouija board almost derailed this whole murder trial.
This is one you won't want to miss.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We left off with Steve Young, the Iceman, facing a mountain of evidence pointing to his guilt in the deaths of Harry and Nicola Fuller. But then, as we all know, a Ouija board makes things a lot more complicated.
Yeah, that's right. We're now stepping into some weird territory, where the legal system crosses paths with, well, the paranormal, and believe me, it's gonna get strange.
So paint the picture for us. We have a jury right in the middle of deciding a double murder case.
Mm-hmm.
And they decide to, what, consult the spirits? Like,
Yeah.
for guidance? Really?
It sounds crazy, but that's exactly what happened. The night before they had to give their verdict, some of the jurors decided to have a Ouija board session in their hotel room. They made a board out of whatever they could find, and they used a wine glass to move around the board.
A wine glass?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to keep an open mind here, but come on, this already sounds like a bad idea. What exactly happened during this seance? Did they, call up the ghost of Harry Fuller or something?
Well, according to the juror who later talked about it, they did make contact with a spirit who claimed to be Harry.
Okay.
And when they asked who killed him, the glass spelled out, get this, Stephen Young did it.
Whoa.
Eh?
Talk about seeking a second opinion. But seriously, you're telling me these jurors who are supposed to be deciding someone's fate were relying on a Ouija board?
It's definitely not how the legal system is supposed to work. But remember, these are everyday people suddenly thrust into this incredibly intense situation. They just spent days listening to horrific testimony, looking at evidence, and carrying the weight of a huge responsibility. It's understandable that the stress and the emotional toll of the case pushed them to look for answers in unconventional ways.
I get feeling overwhelmed, but turning to a Ouija board, that seems like a giant leap from rational thinking to, the supernatural.
He does, yeah.
So what happened when this juror revealed what they had done?
The juror who spoke up said he felt really bad about the whole Ouija board thing, especially after they gave the guilty verdict.
Right.
He finally decided to tell someone, writing an anonymous letter to the court and then talking to the press.
Wow. So this whole thing throws the case into total chaos, right?
Yeah.
A murder trial thrown off track by a Ouija board.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a headline from a supermarket tabloid.
It totally became a media sensation. It made everyone question if the trial was even fair. Remember, the justice system is supposed to work on the principle of a fair and impartial jury, one that makes decisions only on the evidence they hear in court.
Right.
This Ouija board incident made everyone doubt that.
It makes you think, what if this juror hadn't said anything? Would Steve Young have gone to jail based on a decision influenced by a Ouija board? That's a chilling thought.
It's a question legal experts and ethicists debated for years. Did the Ouija board actually influence the verdict? Or was it just a freaky coincidence, a harmless, even though totally foolish, thing done by stressed-out jurors? There's no easy answer.
But the court had to do something, right? They couldn't just ignore this and act like it never happened.
Definitely not. The implications were way too serious to ignore. The legal community was divided on how to move forward. Some argued the jurors messed up badly enough to call for a mistrial, while others felt it was just a one-time thing that didn't really change the outcome.
So what happened? Did they just throw out the verdict and start all over again?
After a lot of discussion, the court decided to overturn the guilty verdict and give Steve Young a new trial. It was a controversial decision, but the judge felt it was the only way to make sure everyone saw the trial as fair and unbiased.
Wow, talk about a wild ride. From a seemingly straightforward case to a media circus, all thanks to a Ouija board. So they had to go through the whole trial again, with a new jury.
That's right. 8 months after the first trial, Steve Young was back in court, facing the same charges, but with a brand new jury. Hopefully this time without any plans to talk to the spirit world.
And this time, without any supernatural interference, was justice finally served.
Legally speaking, yes. The new jury, using only the evidence they heard in court, found Steve Young guilty. Again.
So a sense of closure at last, right?
Kind of. But even with the conviction, there are still some unanswered questions, lingering doubts, and that feeling that there might be more to the story that we'll never know.
Okay, now you've got me curious. What kind of unanswered questions are we talking about? Could Steve Young have had help? Like an accomplice?
That's one of the big mysteries. Remember the reports of two men seen near the cottage the morning of the murders? The police never figured out who they were, and that made people wonder if Young had a partner in crime, someone who wanted Harry dead, maybe for the same reason, maybe for a different reason altogether.
Ooh, a possible conspiracy. I love a good mystery.
Yeah.
So we've got the mystery of the unknown men. What else has kept investigators and true crime fans guessing all these years?
Well, there's also the question of Harry and his shady dealings. We know he wasn't exactly a model citizen.
Right.
But how deep did his criminal activities go? And who did he cross along the way? Was there something in his past, something he was hiding, that ultimately got him killed?
Like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Exactly.
Only to find another layer underneath. And then there's that creepy detail from the 999 call, the whispering voices. Did they ever figure out who those voices belonged to?
That's another mystery that never got solved. A forensic audiologist analyzed the recording and figured out there were two different voices, male voices, whispering in the background after Nicola had been shot. They could only clearly hear one word. Here.
Okay, now that's creepy. It definitely sounds like someone else was there. Someone who might have gotten away with murder. But without a clear ID, I guess it's just another loose end.
Another piece of the puzzle that we might never find.
What about the aftermath of all of this? What happened to the people involved? How did this affect them?
It was undeniably tough on Harry and Nicola's families. Nicola's parents went through some serious health problems because of the stress of the trials, and they never fully recovered from losing their daughter. For them, the whole Ouija board thing just added to their pain and confusion, dragging things out and preventing any real closure.
That's heartbreaking. What about the jurors? Did they get in any trouble for basically causing a mistrial?
You might be surprised to hear that they didn't face any legal consequences for the Ouija board incident. The court said that while what they did was inappropriate, and let's be honest, irresponsible, there was no proof they intended to do anything wrong or tamper with the jury.
But they did mess up the trial. They weren't just playing Monopoly or something. What they did had real consequences.
It absolutely did. The whole thing started a huge discussion about the role of superstition and personal beliefs in the courtroom, and it highlighted how easily the jury process can be influenced by things outside of the case.
And what about that 999 operator who took Nicola's call and thought it was a prank? It must have been awful to realize that someone could have been saved if they'd known what was happening.
It's a terrible reminder of how human error can play a part in emergencies and how important it is to be alert and to question your assumptions. After this case, they changed how they handle silent or unclear calls, emphasizing that every call needs to be taken seriously.
It's like this wave of tragedy, unintended consequences, and human error all tied together. So where do we go from here? What's the biggest takeaway from this wild ride through the Wadhurst murders?
I think this case, with all its craziness, makes us face some uncomfortable truths about the justice system, how we judge each other, and the power of the unknown.
We've covered so much in this deep dive, from the victims' lives to the killer's arrest, that insane jury twist and the impact it all had. But with so many loose ends, it feels like there's still so much we don't know.
That's how it is with true crime, isn't it? We put the pieces together, we hear what people say, but we'll never really know what was going on in the minds of everyone involved.
Speaking of putting pieces together, I heard there's a book about this case written by a professor named Jeremy Gans. It focuses on the jury and that whole Ouija board thing. Have you read it?
I have. It's called the Ouija board jurors. It's a really interesting look at not just the Wadhurst case, but also the bigger issues of juries messing up, how we make decisions, and that blurry line between what we believe and what's actually evidence.
So does it offer any new information about the case itself, or is it more about the legal side of what the jurors did?
It does both, actually. Gans digs into who the jurors were, what their lives were like, and tries to understand what might have led them to that Ouija board session in the first place.
But he's not saying what they did was right,
Right.
but he's trying to understand why they did it.
Exactly. He argues that the Ouija board thing wasn't as simple as the media made it seem. He reminds us that these people were under a ton of pressure, dealing with the terrible details of the crime and that awful 999 call. He thinks the Ouija board might have been a way for them to cope, to try to make sense of something so senseless, and to get some sort of confirmation about the big decision they had to make.
It just shows that even jurors, who are supposed to be neutral and objective, are still just people with emotions, fears, and yeah, even superstitions, just like everyone else.
Exactly. And in this case, their very human actions had a huge impact on the case. Gans isn't saying they were right, but he encourages us to look past the shock and consider their situation.
It's a good reminder that there's always more to this story than we see at first glance. And sometimes the strangest events can reveal deeper truths about human nature and how the legal system works.
It's true.
The Wadhurst murders are a case that sticks with you. A story of secret lives, people driven by money, the unpredictable path of justice, and the unsettling feeling that maybe a conviction doesn't always give us all the answers.
It doesn't, no.
And for our listeners who have been on this deep dive journey with us, what's the question they should be thinking about as we wrap up this episode?
I think the Wadhurst murders make us look deeper, to question what we believe about people and the world around us. It forces us to face some uncomfortable truths about what people are capable of, and how easily our sense of safety can be shattered.
It makes you think about how much is left to chance, too. What if the jurors hadn't played with that Ouija board? What if the operator had recognized the panic in Nicola's voice?
Right. It's a reminder that even the most carefully planned things can be thrown off course by seemingly small actions or inactions. The Wadhurst murders are a stark reminder that the line between the normal and the extraordinary can be very thin.
Steve Young seemed like an average family man, an insurance broker, but he had a hidden passion for guns and a dark secret that led to a terrible act of violence. It makes you question how well you can really judge people.
Absolutely. It's easy to label people based on how they look or what we assume about them, but we never really know what's going on behind closed doors, what secrets people are keeping or what they might do.
So if you're as fascinated by this case as we are, we encourage you to learn more. We've got links to more information in the show notes, including Professor Gans's book, The Ouija Board Jurors.
Check it out.
And as always, we want to hear your thoughts and theories. Join the conversation on our social media, and let's keep exploring the mysteries of this case. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and remember, even the most ordinary people can have extraordinary secrets. It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
How a case that seems so simple at first could become such a tangled web. We start with what looks like an open and shut murder case, tons of evidence against Steve Young, and then bam, a Ouija board turns everything upside down.
It just shows you how human actions, even things that seem totally unrelated to the case, can have these huge ripple effects on the whole idea of justice.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. These jurors, maybe they were looking for answers, maybe just a way to escape the pressure of what they were dealing with, but they ended up creating this massive legal and media circus.
Oh, can't forget, this wasn't some game. What they did had real-world consequences. They caused a whole retrial and made the families of the victims suffer even longer.
Absolutely. It just underlines how crucial it is to choose the right jury and make sure they understand that they need to stay focused on the evidence presented in court. They're given this enormous responsibility to judge other people based only on what they hear in the courtroom. But as we saw in this case, even jurors with the best intentions can be swayed by things outside the courtroom, whether it's the media, their own biases, or even, like we've been talking about, the whole supernatural thing.
It makes you wonder, what can be done to prevent this kind of thing from happening again? I mean, we can't exactly outlaw Ouija boards, can we?
Well, there are things they can do. Like in high-profile cases, they can keep juries isolated to limit their exposure to outside information. And judges constantly remind jurors throughout the trial to make their decision based solely on the evidence.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it boils down to personal responsibility and whether the jurors grasp how important their role is in the justice system.
It's a bit unsettling. It reminds us that the system isn't perfect, that people make mistakes, and those mistakes can have huge consequences, even in life or death situations.
Exactly. And it brings us back to that question. Was justice really served in the Wadhurst case? Sure, they convicted Steve Young in the end, but there are so many unanswered questions. It's tough to shake the feeling that there's more to it.
Those unidentified men near the cottage, the whispers on the 999 call, the full extent of Harry's shady dealings, all these threads that were never really tied up. It's like a puzzle with missing pieces.
And that's a big part of why true crime is so fascinating. That need to understand, to solve the puzzle, to find those missing pieces and make sense of it all.
But sometimes those answers just stay out of reach, and we're left with the uncertainty and knowing that we might never have the complete picture.
And that uncertainty, in a way, reflects how complex life can be. We're often faced with situations where there are no easy answers, where the truth is hard to find, and where we just have to learn to live with not knowing everything.
That's a pretty powerful takeaway from this deep dive. The Wadhurst murders, it's not just about the headlines and the courtroom drama. It gives us a glimpse into what it means to be human. The love, the betrayals, how greed and desperation can drive people, and our constant struggle to understand a world that can seem random and unpredictable.
It really does. It's a case that makes us question what we think we know, look beyond the surface, and realize that even when we're searching for justice, things aren't always black and white.
So for our listeners, we hope this deep dive has made you curious, made you think critically, and maybe even left you with some of your own questions.
Yeah, we hope so.
If you're as intrigued by the Wadhurst murders as we are, we encourage you to dig a little deeper. We've included links to more information in the show notes, including Professor Gans's book, The Ouija Board Jurors.
That's a great read.
And, as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and theories. Join the conversation on our social media, and let's keep unraveling the mysteries of this captivating case. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and always remember, sometimes the most ordinary people can be hiding the most extraordinary secrets.